Welcome everybody for coming to this webinar. I'd just like to once again just welcome all of you. Thank you so much for making the time. My name is Raheel Shamim. I'm from Link High Technology. We are a managed services provider based in Morris Plains, New Jersey. We're partnering up with FifthWall Solutions for this webinar. If you've received the email, if you saw the invite, you kind of have an idea of what it is that we're doing here, why we believe this conversation is so important. Just to kind of reiterate and introduce everybody, I will just be leading. I'll just be starting the presentation. So if we can go to the next page. So today's speakers are, again, myself. I am the Client Services Manager over here at Link High. With us, we have Victor Liu, who is our president at Link High Technology. And we also have Reed Wellock and Will Brooks from FifthWall. So just to give you a little bit of background about Link High Technology, we are a managed services provider. Like I said, based in Morris Plains. We've been doing it for 31 years. So we've seen a lot of the changes that have come in this space, right? So if you want to be a managed services provider that survives in this space for 31 years, the one thing that you have to do is you have to understand the landscape and you have to evolve with the landscape. Basically in the last 3 to 4 years, the most important conversation that anybody in technology should be having is around security. If you're not having a conversation about security within your organization, if you're not having that conversation with your managed services provider, then you are really behind the times. That's the most important thing that you need to be talking about. So at Link High, we have made an initiative to not only have the right solutions for us and our customers, but always be looking for the right solutions for what's coming down the pike. And with that, a big part of that is today is cybersecurity insurance. So we've had customers in the past that have looked into cybersecurity insurance. They've had, they send us the forms for us to look at what controls we have in place for them. And then, they go out there and they look to buy insurance. The reason why we've partnered with Fifth Wall is because Fifth Wall is, I'm not sure if I would call them the industry leader in this space, or if they would actually be better described as the only people that are doing this in this space that you can kind of verify. So Fifth Wall, their focus is just cyber insurance, because it's not one size fits all. You have to look at your organization. You have to see what's actually important to your organization, and you have to make sure that the options that you're going with are actually what serve your organization best. So Fifth Wall is, we're honored to have them here. The way that we're going to be running this webinar is we're going to start off with Victor talking a little bit about the threats as they stand today, and then we're going to have Reed and Will step in and give us an idea of what to look for when it comes to selecting the right insurance plan for yourself. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Victor.
Great. Well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to make the technical side very brief. Today's more educational about cyber insurance. There's only a few slides just to kind of give the technical background. I'm going to go over the threat landscape. And these are all events I think everyone's reading in the news or seeing it on CNN every single day about the threats to your business or organization. Social engineering is probably the #1 way that people or hackers are exploiting networks and organizations. And what it is really just tricking your people into revealing privileged information, usually through phishing, which is just emails. They're going through text messages. They're also going through websites. So there's a variety of ways. Ransomware is usually a targeted attack on your organization, which encrypts your computers and your servers. And then what the hackers are doing is asking for ransom with Bitcoin as payment to be able to unlock that. Vulnerability exploits. When we talk about vulnerability exploits, it's not just your computers and servers. I think that's the conversation Raheel and I are having with our population is everything is a computer or IP based. So just to give some stories, like we've had clients go down last year because their payroll time clock was infected. Normally you wouldn't think. We were looking for computers on the network. It took us a day to kind of figure out that the payroll time clock was a computer that the payroll company put in the network, just plugged it in, and it was infected. Right, so it's really copiers, IP cameras are all part of your network, and that's something that you should be aware of. Credential theft is really impersonating you to access your protected data or phishing or fish for your contacts. And then down at the bottom, there's some stats. 82% of breaches involve the human element, social attacks, errors, and misuse. 62% of attacks involved a partner or compromise. The takeaway is that the end user is the weakest link. So one thing we've been really stressing is security awareness training. You can put layers and layers of cybersecurity controls and services, but the end user, usually if you read about an exploit or a hack, it started with someone clicking on an email, right? So education is probably the priority. Next slide, please. This one I'm not going to read through, but in 2021, cyber attacks on corporate networks increased by 50% as compared to 2020. Right, and it just shows the attacks per organization. You know, education and research is number one, and that's really because they're a larger target and harder to protect since you have a mixture of students, teachers, and administrators.
Yeah, and I just want to step in real quick here, Victor. Hey, everyone, I'm Will
Sure.
from FifthWall. And one of the reasons you're seeing these attacks increase on education and government facilities, specifically, so schools, municipalities, local government, big time, is because a lot of those organizations have to pass annual budgets in order to approve security controls and improve upping their protection. So a lot of times what we see here is a lot of these attacks are targeted on people who criminals know are not protecting themselves. But on top of that, some of these are increasing, like manufacturing. It's in the middle of the rows here, but it's definitely being hit harder than it used to. There's payment processors. There's all sorts of pretty much where the risk is, but also they look for the holes, and that's why we're starting to see these trends specifically for these carriers.
Thank you. So NIST, cybersecurity framework. So NIST is a government agency that has cyber standards, and LinkI, almost every IT provider uses NIST as our framework for security. And there's really 5 functions. It's really identify, right? Protect, detect, respond, and recover. So all 5 elements are part of your security controls. I'm not going to read each one. But if you just focus on, identify, protect, and that's not enough, right? Detection is probably something that I've noticed that a lot of clients and prospects are failing. They're really focusing on identifying and protecting. The assumption nowadays is the malicious actor is going to get into your network, right? There's stats to say how many days they're in your network before they're detected. So detection is a must. Everyone should really get to the point that there has to be detection to see if there's inappropriate activity on your network. Respond. So that's something that there's a technical response, which I'll kind of cover briefly, and there's a cyber insurance response that Will and Reed will go over as well. And then recovery, right? After an event, there is always a recovery. So protect and detect review, multi-factor authentication. This is a requirement by every cyber insurance. So it's really a secondary method to identify that you are who you are, right? Just the username and password is not enough. In its simplest form, MFA is your cell phone and SMS through like banking, financial industries. SMS is really not considered secure anymore. So you should really be moving to some sort of application based. I think most financial institutions will have an app that you can download or scan in with a QR code, and that's more secure than SMS. Advanced email security. So just having email out of the box like Office 365 or Google is not enough. They have very rudimentary or basic email defenses. So you really need a secondary one. If you look at your cyber insurance, which Will and Reed will go over, they're naming or asking what additional, email security gateways you're using. Recovery readiness. If you get hit by an incident, are you ready to recover? Usually that's through some sort of backup, right? Backup needs to be off-site. It needs to be immutable, which means it can't be changed. And off-site really means that it can't be touched by the hackers. So in the last 3 ransomware incidents that our clients have had in the last 5 years, whenever the client has a backup on site, which means you have like a little backup drive, or a SAN or a NAS on site, the first thing the hackers will do is encrypt that backup, right? So if your only backup is on site right next to your network that was encrypted or ransomware, you're really, in a bad position. Security awareness training and testing. It's rapidly becoming a requirement. It's always a question in cyber insurance. As we mentioned, the end user is probably the weakest link. So it's very important to have security awareness training. Managed detection and response. So this goes to what we talked about is looking for strange activity or abnormal activity on your network and responding to it. This is usually a third party like Lincoln. We use the third party MDR response. So there's always a 24/7 response that if there's abnormal activity on the network, they have permission to block that login. So if someone logs in outside the US, they have permission to automatically block that user unless we're telling them someone's vacationing in Europe or something like that. Dark web monitoring, it's important. So the dark web is where hackers have a tendency to post username and passwords that have been cracked. So, and hackers can buy usernames and passwords from the dark web as well. Yeah, an example is like Home Depot. They were breached several years ago. I got a letter from Home Depot so that my information was, possibly compromised. They gave me 1 year credit protection because I had their credit card. The dark web monitoring is important, especially if you reuse the same password, which you shouldn't. You really should have a unique password for each site that you log into. But if you're reusing the same password, the dark web monitoring would tell you, oh, this password has been compromised. I should make sure I haven't used it in any of my other sites. And if you have, then you should change it immediately. One thing I would recommend is the password manager. I've been using one, for many years. Most of the people in our organization have. This just gives you the ability, because no one can remember all these passwords. So I have a unique password that's generated by the password manager in my password manager. So, and then Security Operations Center is that 24/7 monitoring and response that I spoke about. So security event response. So this is the technical part. The technical response is really recognizing and stopping any suspicious or harmful processes, identifying the affected endpoint and isolating. So I think the most important thing is once you detect or recognize there's abnormal activity, is really isolating them from your network. It could be as simple as pulling out the plug to that device to make sure it's not spreading, shutting down. If you have servers on premise, you should probably shut those down as well. And then operational response. Every organization should have a security incident response plan that has procedures, roles, responsibilities. If you email me afterwards, we have a simple 2-page plan that we could fill out that I could send to you that you could fill out yourself. It's really who gets notified in the organization if there's a breach, what are the steps necessary, and who's the most important in terms of priority to get up. Usually it's like finance, HR, operations. So it's very important to have that documented. And then the public response, this is more cyber insurance will be helping on this portion, right? Understanding your reporting obligations, are there regulatory compliance or contractual, requirements for you to disclose. And then also your public image.
That's pretty much what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Cool. Reed. Okay, so Reed and I are going to take over from here. We're going to do some cyber insurance fun. Cyber insurance is a good time. Insurance is fun for everybody, I'm sure. So we're going to dive into the details here. So one of the reasons we wanted to start with all that technical information is, well, on one side, it's important to understand the security that LinkHigh is offering and what they're able to do. But at the same time, it's recognition that to only get one half of your business protected is to leave the other side open. It's you buy a car and you could, I live in New York State. New York State requires you have insurance on your vehicles, and they require a certain level that you're supposed to carry. You could carry more. You want to protect yourself in the event of an accident, but at the same time, you want to have all those safety features in your car so that even if you're in an accident, you're not just getting money out of it, you're actually keeping yourself and other passengers in the car safe. We want to kind of treat things the same way when it comes to cyber, that you want to do everything possible and understand all the options that are in front of you when it comes to protecting your business on the front end to stop people from getting in. And then if a bad actor gets in and a claim has to be filed, that's where we're going to get into how insurance works. So we have a lot of these, some scenarios here that just kind of help us understand what a breach might look like, because it can look like a lot of different things, like Victor brought up at the beginning. So like we said, a lot of times it's due to user error. So if an employee inadvertently transmitted a virus to customers and suppliers, and the company was sued for failing to contain the virus, and the losses totaled more than $3 million. So a normal comprehensive cyber policy is going to be between a $1 and $3 million limit, which means for when all is said and done, you're going to be protected from 1 to 3 million. But it's crazy to think about that all the liability, all the legalese that comes with a cyber breach can total up to all that money, but that's a common occurrence. An email appeared. This is probably one that we've all experienced on some level, that we get an email from someone that looks like someone we might know. So in this case, a long-standing vendor relationship directed to a company to update banking information for their account. So the company updated their bank information and ended up paying over $200,000 to the fraudster, and none of those funds were recovered. So there's out $200,000. If you don't have insurance, that's going to hurt. A hacker gained access to the email account of an employee of a small accounting firm, and the hacker used the email address to compromise several of the firm's client organizations. The firm was sued to the point of bankruptcy by their affected clients. If a hacker gets access to your network, they're going to have access to all of it, not just the one, piece of software that they hacked. A recent example, Uber. We probably heard about on the news. Uber got hacked, and the teenager who got in to Uber's systems then used the employee Slack channel to announce that he had hacked Uber. So that's not how he got in, but he did get access to all their other channels just because he had hacked it. So here's some imagined scenarios. Imagine if a hacker gained access to the email accounts of a staff member, and that staff member had the authority to direct other staff members or communicate with a client or partner. So now they're just sending spoof emails to really important people, both within and outside of the company. Imagine the damage that your reputation would have if your connections to other partners or customers were exploited, leading to their breach. So not only were you breached, but now because the bad actors on your network, they are using your network and pretending to be you in order to breach other customers and partners. And imagine the disruption to your business if all of your files and records disappeared suddenly and your systems used were inaccessible. That's a ransomware attack. So your computer is taken ransom. Recently, there's been a new development in ransomware. So it's not just your computer being taken ransom, but your data being completely destroyed. And that's where things like Victor was talking about with backups, backing up everything consistently and constantly is going to be really beneficial to, in the event something happens where your computer's taken over.
Hey, Will, real quick,
yeah.
do you mind if I
Please.
also chime in? So, hi everyone, Reed Wellock from FifthWall. The reason we want to make sure these scenarios are out there is because I think a lot of times this is a lot of gloom and doom, which is unfortunately a natural part of our side of the business. But these are real claims too. And often when we talk to business owners, there's a part of this problem I think that's probably more easily understood because you can touch it. It's tangible, right? When you talk about like data that's lost, things like that. But there's also the parts and pieces that we see that is intangible. It's indirect loss around business interruption, for example. So being down and you can't generate revenue, or the reputation your business can suffer because you were breached. So these are things we always want to make sure folks are thinking through, because it's often the elements that we see are overlooked. You know, we are helping folks get through to the other side after they've been hit. And unfortunately, they're learning in real time, and we want to change that. We want to make sure folks are going into this eyes wide open. So, Will, why don't I take the next couple here on
Sure.
just, we've already mentioned this, so we don't need to harp on it, but there's just a reality that when you look at your business, you may be asking yourself, well, why would someone want to attack me, right? What is it? Why am I special? The reality is you're not. I mean, you may be, but you may be victim to an attack and the attacker didn't really even know who you were. They just saw that they got an open door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way for them to get an open door now is to get someone to open it up for them. That's just what this is turning into. So there's still a lot of sophistication out there. There's still a lot of very, very smart people that are doing brute force attacks and that are doing this from a technical perspective. But work smart, not hard, right? If I can get someone to open the door for me, that's the route I'm going to take. And that's the route that the criminals are taking. So we want to make sure, we're going to harp on this a lot, but this is just the reality. People are the biggest vulnerability, right? I, as someone in a position at my company, hopefully this won't happen again, but it's happened to me. I've accidentally clicked on a link, something that I should not have clicked on because I was moving too fast. I was distracted. So that's just a disclaimer that should always be out to every single organization, because you can put up and you can be working with someone like Link High and be working with someone that has the tools that you need to make yourself as secure as you need to be. But the reality is there is still always that dynamic factor in this, and this is people, right? Human nature. So real quick, before we get into the fun topic of policies, which I know everyone probably got into this webinar because they want to know about cyber insurance, get into the policies, but I promise we won't bore you. Let's just real quick recap how we actually got here, because I think this is a story that's really important. If you've applied for insurance recently, if you've already gotten insurance, probably if you've been a part of this, the game's changed a bit. So we come from a world where cyber insurance used to be really simple. I say back in the day, but it wasn't that long ago. But from 2015 to 2018, it was really an easy way to get cyber insurance. I mean this literally. All you had to do was say, hey, I'm a business that has revenue. Here's my revenue. Oh, by the way, I also have a website. Here's my website. Great. Here's $1 million in cyber liability. There's a big problem with that. In that interaction, I didn't really ask you about your security. I didn't really ask you about how secure are you, which is kind of insane for an insurance vertical to not be considering those things. And insurance kind of made a big mistake, a very, very big mistake. There was not very good underwriting, if any at all. And what insurance companies were asking for really was way, way, way too low. But they saw it as a way to get market share, and that's what they did. Well, guess what? They paid the price. So what happened is when ransomware came into the scene, we saw the legitimacy of this issue. This wasn't just theory, this is real. Claims started to come in, and they came in significantly. We saw a number of carriers completely back out from cyber. We saw them lose tons of money, and it was a forced reality where they started to redevelop the process the way it should have been all along. So what's the process look like today? Well, now we see carriers that actually genuinely want to better understand your security posture. They're asking more relevant questions. They want to know specifics. Now, they're still learning, but they're getting closer. So why this is important is this webinar we're doing together, we're doing it with Link High. Well, insurance and technical solutions and security now are living together, because insurance really does care about, I mean, selfishly, insurers are not nonprofits, right? They want to try to protect their premiums. And so they're asking for very specific things. And we're going to cover that later in the presentation of what's insurance really looking for right now. Because that should be a really clear map for a business owner to say, oh, okay, these are the areas that are being taken very serious, right? So if you don't have things like MFA, you don't have EDR in place, things that insurance companies are now saying are kind of must-haves, we should really be paying attention. So anything else you want to add here, Will?
No, I think that was right on point. And we, like you said, we're going to get to the evolving underwriting in a bit here.
Yeah. Why don't you take us through then, just because I think before we get into the minutia here, there's a high level difference. If you don't know the answer to this question, that's perfectly okay, because this is literally what FifthWall does on a day-to-day basis. But there's a big difference of what is out there in the market. When we say cyber, what we mean is comprehensive. So what do we mean by comprehensive, Will?
Sure. So the question at the top, what type of cyber insurance do you have? Something to really consider here and think about is, do you have cyber insurance because your agent said, hey, you can add cyber insurance for $300 onto your general liability policy? And it's like, oh, that sounds good. I want to be protected by cyber. Maybe you don't have any coverage at all, or maybe you do have a comprehensive cyber policy. But what we mean by that is that a lot of times what you'll see is this cyber liability, they call it an endorsement. Think of like an add-on where they add cyber, a small cyber liability portion. So think minimal protection. It says their limits are at or below 100,000. If you look at the scenarios we had, there was only one scenario where it was even in the low 100,000s, and that was cybercrime, which typically is severely sublimited anyway, which means it's not even protected up to the full amount of the policy. And a lot of times those endorsement add-on policies have no cybercrime provisions whatsoever. We get them, and what they do effectively is, it's kind of like, here's a little handout to help with your lawsuits that are going to arise if there's a breach. Breaches, as we're seeing, are causing a lot of issues. They web out. It's not just like, hey, you're being sued because this thing happened. You're being sued because every client who you work with has now had their data compromised, and every single one of them might be coming after you. We don't know. So there's so many layers to a cyber attack that a little add-on policy is not really going to do much. So what we do at FifthWall is specialize in what we call a comprehensive cyber policy. And while we'll break that down in a little bit, really the way to think of it is that's going to have every coverage that a standard cyber policy has. The limits aren't going to start low. It's not going to be this 100,000 thing. We're looking at $1 million limits. Typically you'll see 1 to 3 million. Sometimes you see up to 5. Really big companies build stacks on top of stacks, and you have $10, $20 million policies, which are crazy. But they're designed to pay claims. And what that means is, I'm sure you've seen commercials where this is more towards like the auto industry or the personal policy stuff, but they'll say, oh, my cyber insurance didn't actually pay out anything that happened, or my auto policy didn't, I got into a car accident and I didn't get nearly what was supposed to, what things cost me. A cyber insurance policy through FifthWall, or just a comprehensive policy. I don't want to say through FifthWall, just if you have a comprehensive policy, really what that means is that if you have a breach, it is designed to help you. That's the whole point. You're investing in it. Yes, it's getting more expensive. Yes, it is not fun to pay those increasing premiums every year, but at the same time, you're investing in your protection, just like you are with security controls up front. And I guess that last point, the difference between that coverage, like I said, it's just this little endorsement. Hey, you want to add cyber? Sure, check a box. Versus, hey, let's really talk about what a cyber policy covers. If you've had that conversation, chances are you probably have some more comprehensive policy. But if you're just having this little check a box thing, you may want to evaluate what your policy is actually protecting.
And to Will's point, if you're sitting there going, yeah, I'm not actually sure, then the answer might be right there in front of you. Because typically, if you had purchased a comprehensive policy, you actually sat down with your agent and talked through it. This isn't one of those things they just kind of did it for you. So that's a really important element, because you shouldn't just buy something because you think you're supposed to. You should have the opportunity to have a quality conversation to understand what this is, what it's meant to do, why is this an investment? Because it truly is. Insurance is weird. Sometimes you don't see the return on investment, which is actually a good thing, because that means nothing bad happened, but you don't actually see the value. But you don't want to wait until you need it to know whether or not it's going to do what it's supposed to do, right? So with that, Will, we'll kind of break down a little bit more this next slide, but we've got an exercise that I think whenever we talk about coverage, it is helpful to understand kind of just the high level, what does a policy do, especially in the beginning, because it does paint a nice picture of understanding kind of, okay, this is kind of what a breach looks like too, right? So if you follow the path of a policy, it kind of shows you the path of what a breach typically looks like, even though they're kind of like snowflakes. None of them are exactly the same. But whenever you look at just the initial right of boom, which is right where, there's a breach and now we're in the response piece. It's this sticky world when you're dealing with data, especially in certain industries, where there's a lot of regulatory parts and pieces to this that could escalate really quickly. And the insurance world has learned pretty fast that you want to make sure you have legal representation early on. And you want to establish attorney-client privilege, because depending on the nature of the breach, depending on the nature of the records, we need to be able to have very candid conversations very quickly. But in order for legal to do their job and to understand what it is that they're trying to address and walk a client through, they need answers. They need to know the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how, all of those things around the nature of this breach. And that's forensics. And forensics is an exercise that's a specialty, but it's something that it's really needed. But guess what? It's also really costly. It's an expensive service, but typically it's required. For example, if there is a data breach and it is clear that there is personal identifiable information that's been exposed on third-party individuals, so your customers, your clients, whomever, the state's going to require you to notify those individuals, okay? Now, how do we know who to notify? And we have to notify the individuals of the nature of the breach. Well, guess what? That means you have to have forensics done. So a lot of these, it's kind of the cart and the horse at the same time. But from there, we see this stem out. It can kind of go multiple different places, but probably more in Link High's world, they would say, okay, this is part of incident response, right? This is part of the IR side. In our world, in insurance, we're looking at this on a claim side to say, okay, in order for us to navigate through a claim, we got to get the intelligence, we got to understand what this is, and we got to get the right representation in place. And then there's going to be multiple third parties that need to come into play. That may sound really hectic and really scary, and kind of it is, but the nice thing about having a comprehensive policy is, guess what? That's already carved out for you, right? So you actually have breach facilitation. So really the big thing is you got to make that first phone call and go, okay, I think something bad happened. What's next? If you're working with a good insurance program, they're going to go, here's what's next. Let's go. And they're going to walk you through.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Will?
No, I think that's exactly what it is. You want to have that peace of mind, not just that I'm protected, but that someone's going to help me through this. And that I think is something we don't typically think about with insurance, but because of the complexity of a breach and how, just like Reed said, everyone's a little different. So to have experts on one side who can really walk you through the process of what to do. What do I do next? I can't access my system. I can't do X, Y, or Z. What do I do? there's, they'll help you along the way. That's really an important piece of a comprehensive policy. So we want to take a look at a comprehensive cyber policy, just in a little more detail. It's fun for me. I'm an insurance nerd. It's probably fun for Reed too, but I know sometimes it's not the most fun to look at all this stuff. But it's important to know that I'm going to point out here that if you look at the top, the gray and the light blue boxes there, you have legal expense, notification, credit monitoring, public relations, fines. That's like PCI as well, and first and third party liability. When you check a little box that says, do you want cyber added onto your liability policy? Typically, you're getting only those coverages, and those coverages are not 1 million, they're 100,000, and that's 100,000 combined, not per line. So when we say aggregate limit here, if you're unfamiliar with the term, what that means is for every claim, the insurance policy will pay out up to the aggregate limit, some combination of the coverages on that form. So when you look at those first 8 coverages, the grays and the light blues, on that little checkbox policy, the endorsement policy, if you have that, you're really only looking at $100,000 total for all of those coverages. That's not going to be nearly enough. And that's one of the issues that we're running into regularly with a lot of people, is that they're being told by their agent, get cyber, and they give them that. So we want to just educate, make people aware, and understand that, first of all, you're only being covered for those third-party things, and ultimately, you probably won't be covered enough. But on top of that, a comprehensive policy is going to include a couple other things, or not a couple, actually more than double the amount of coverages. So one of those is going to be extortion, loss, ransomware, which is the company will pay the ransom if it comes to that. Ideally, it doesn't. Ideally, you have backups in place. Ideally, you have good security in place, that you have negotiators come in through the insurance carrier who can either negotiate down the ransom or completely remove it. Who knows? Business interruption and recovery is a huge one. I mean, you see this on other policies, but we don't think about it with cyber. But if your computer is down, everything is done on the network today. So if you don't have access to your network, you functionally, a lot of companies cannot operate without access to their systems. And for a policy to not pay out and say, hey, we're going to help keep your income going while we help you through this recovery, I mean, that's such an important coverage to have. Multimedia and IP liability is an interesting one, because that's really about, like, if you slander someone else, or if you say something, correct me if I'm wrong, Reed, but it's like if something is said negatively or impacting another person, you're kind of, it's like tarnishing someone else's reputation digitally. Then reputational damage we talked about. Data replacement. So not only is your business, are you seeing income, but if you lose data, they're going to help you recover that. Hardware replacement is, if any of your hard drives get fried or any of your systems go down because of different things, they're going to help replace that. Dependent network interruption, any systems that you require access to that are being affected by that breach are also, you're also getting that income from those. Cryptojacking, that was one Victor talked about early on, but someone may sneak onto your network without you knowing it and start using a ton of your internal CPU resources to mine for Bitcoin. And when that gets exposed, you recognize, hey, my computer's going real slow all of a sudden. And back in the day, it probably just meant that your computer was old. But today, it could be that someone's on there hogging up a bunch of resources. Invoice manipulation is when they pretend to be your company and they send out invoices to clients because they got a hold of your client list, and your clients pay those invoices, but you don't get that money. The criminal is getting that money. And then those last 3, those are your specific. I don't know why invoice manipulation isn't within this area, but specifically these are your they call them cybercrime coverages. So electronic theft is when they effectively get a hold of your bank account information, kind of like that scenario we said before, and they make a withdrawal from your bank. Social engineering, that where they pretend to be you, and telecom theft is, I mean, that kind of is in line with cryptojacking. They're using your utilities for to make money, to mine, to do different things. But there's, all that aside, I mean, each of those coverages are extremely important, but what's what's really important takeaway from here is that if you don't have a comprehensive policy, you're really only being covered for liability, and it's only to a very small amount. And there's so much more that is affected in the event of a breach that we don't really think about because until it happens. Reed, you got anything to add?
Yeah, just to add, I think the reality is no one could predict if you were to go through a cyber event and really predict what then are the damages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a cyber event can have varying levels of impact depending on the type of attack, what was affected, your downtime, was there extortion, did they steal money, all these different things. So for anyone that says, hey, let's just do an a la carte option, it's really, really, really dangerous because you're rolling the dice on something that you don't have any control on and can't predict. And that's why, as an industry, it's been approached to say, look, we need to take a comprehensive approach here. Same with, you could say, with fire. Right? Do we know how fire specifically is going to move through your home and only burn certain parts? No, we don't, because we don't even know where the fire would have come from. So think of it in that way when you think about cyber insurance, protecting your business. Think of it as something that you really are looking for something that it is a net. It is a safety net. It's meant to catch you. It's not just meant to catch part of you, right?
Yeah.
So real quick, just for time's sake, let's roll through here because I know everyone was probably like, oh no, let's talk about more insurance, but sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I talked earlier about, I'll use my words, or we got into a hard market, but basically insurance put themselves between a rock and a hard place, right? And they all of a sudden had to say, okay, well, we really need to define what does a good risk look like? Meaning, if we're going to insure somebody, how do we know they're actually taking this seriously? So they're taking proper measures to protect their house, meaning their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I want to make sure is clear is that Fifth Wall, we're great because we've been doing nothing but cyber insurance for years. This is all we do. We're a bunch of cyber insurance nerds. But we also have access to the global marketplace of carriers. So we talk to every single carrier daily. This is not standardized. So it's not like there was a universal mandate that said cyber insurance needs to operate in this way every single time. But over the course of a couple years, watching over 40 carriers pinpoint specific elements that they're saying are really important to them, that kind of let us know, okay, this is turning more into an eligibility core control list, meaning if you want to be taken seriously by an insurer to say, yes, I'm in good shape, I'm ready to be insurable, I'm doing the right things. These are the basics. These are the table stakes, I'll say, okay, of where we've gotten to today. I say that because this is not going to be the same 6 months from now. It's not going to be the same a year from now. This is an ever evolving risk, which if you think about it is kind of crazy, right? You've got something that's always changing, always evolving. Again, it's not like fire. It's not like something that we have looked at for long enough. We understand how it works and how it affects things. So we talked about these specifically, but earlier, Victor went through, if not all of these, I think, yeah, all of these. But when you look at them, this is a conversation that if you haven't adopted, you want to make sure you're talking to Link High about not only the importance, but we're here in partnership because these are also controls that are very relevant to renewal, or even just getting coverage. But it's also a conversation you want to make sure you're working with someone like Link High again, that they're privy to this as well, because it's almost there's so many frameworks out there, and most folks in our industry are saying, yeah, we need another framework, like we need another hole in our head. But insurance is kind of turning into that in a way, right? It's creating its own version of compliance. So something we want to make sure we're highlighting, and anything, Will, and actually anything, Victor or Raheel, you guys want to add on these controls?
No, you're correct. We are filling out probably 2 to 5 cyber insurance questionnaires a week for our clients. And these 5 are the core. It's on every cyber insurance. And then what I've noticed are larger clients, their carriers are asking for even more. Besides just saying, do you have multi-factor? They're actually looking for documented proof. So what used to take us 30 minutes to 60 minutes to fill out a questionnaire, our largest clients are taking hours, because it's no longer like they're taking our word or the client word, yes or no. They're saying, document it, show me that you actually did it. And that probably stems from travelers, which you'll probably go over later.
Yeah,
Actually, we're gonna hit it right now.
We'll talk about that. So this was in the news over the summer that it said insured lied about MFA use. That's a dicey subject in and of itself. These applications are confusing. I mean, if you're taking them to your IT service to get them filled out, that usually is a good sign that it's a confusing application and it's not super clear. A lot of times we just want to check boxes. We're like, look, I need the coverage. Let me just check the boxes. I check the box. Hey, they gave me coverage. Cool. We don't think much about it. It's like maybe you needed cyber insurance because a contract requires it. Who knows? But a company this summer had a breach. And when forensics came in, like Reed showed before, you're going to have legal come in and they're going to need information. So they send forensics in. Forensics came in and determined that the client who said they had MFA in place actually did not. So travelers tried to throw out the policy. They said, we want to rescind this policy and we do not want to cover this claim because the insured misrepresented their security position. And it got all into court. It got into a lawsuit. It was a breach that could have been handled very simply, and it turned into something very complicated and very frustrating. So that's why when we talk about the security controls back here, and working with an IT company like Link High, who can enable these things, monitor these things, make sure they're correct and up to speed and all that good stuff. Why it's so important? Because right now, cybersecurity is complex. It is confusing. It's frustrating to fill out those applications, and you want to make sure you're doing it right, because you don't want to risk a situation like this, where the carrier says, "You lied. We don't want to cover this anymore."
It's also important to no exception. So we don't allow this anymore, but previous years, it'd be like a C-level executive say, yes, MFA is very important, enable it for everyone except for me. Well, usually the C-level people need more protection than anyone else because they had the most sensitive data, right? So now our policy is all or none. We just won't,
That's great.
Good.
If you won't do it all, I'm not filling out the cyber insurance questionnaire, or I'm going to put no.
Yeah, that's great.
It is a necessary element where I think if these conversations aren't happening, it's nice that, insurance is kind of pushing this along. But and our hope too is that business owners look at this and they take it a lot more seriously. I think we're biased, obviously, because I see every day, I see the damages, right? We're seeing claims. So, I've gotten some pretty scary stories to tell, but if you're not touching it, if you're not feeling it, if you haven't touched the stove yet to know it's hot, it understandably takes some time. And so these are the things that are really important conversations you want to make sure you're having, and you want to listen to the people that genuinely know how to control this risk.
Definitely. Cool. So key takeaways. That first one, cyber attacks are getting more complex. I was a pastor working at a church for the past 5 years prior to coming on with FifthWall, and there were emails that were sent to every member of the church that looked like they were coming from the lead pastor and said, click this link. It's just ridiculous. Like, hey, I need your help with an event, and click this link. And if you had clicked it, you would have had your computer taken ransom. You probably would have lost money, blah, blah, blah. It would have been, so first of all, that's 2 points, right? It's complex. It looked legit, but also they were targeting a church. To Victor's point way early on, or Reed's point, they don't know who you are. They're just casting a wide net, hoping that someone bites. It's really what it is. Cyber insurance is going to be the key to controlling your recovery costs. That's because it's going to be expensive. You don't know what it's going to look like. Having insurance in place is going to help with those costs. And policies are not the same. So if you have a policy now, make sure that you understand what it covers. Ask your agent, or with FifthWall, we'll do free policy reviews too. You bring your policy to Victor, he can send it over to us. We can take a look at it, make sure it's good. Get involved 3 months in advance. Reed, is this referring renewals?
That is referring to renewals.
Okay.
So, but real quick, some pain points that we've seen are folks that want to find, they want to get coverage, they want to get good coverage, but they may realize that they don't have the proper controls in place to qualify. Sometimes, in some instances, that can be really quick, but in others, that can take some time. And so a recommendation really is to give yourself a couple months if you're going to go through that exercise, because you don't know.
Yeah, and just in general, I mean, with all three of these, a pain point for us has been, and I mean, for other insurance area lines of business, cars, auto, personal, commercial, you know, property, all that kind of stuff. A lot of times it's like, look, I need the insurance. Tell me what I need to do to get the insurance. And so I want to meet the bare minimum, just get me the insurance. But in the cyber landscape, because things are shifting so dramatically, I love what you said, Victor, that you're saying, look, if someone wants to come through us, they need to say yes to everything, not just yes to a few things. Just like a cyber policy shouldn't be a la carte, your security controls shouldn't be a la carte. Be prepared always. I mean, that's really the consistent recommendation we can make, because carriers are looking for more. And if you don't meet those controls, you may be denied coverage. Your claims might be denied. You may face ridiculously high premiums that you don't want to pay, or you might just not be eligible.